Oh, yes, we are recording this. So we're recording it because eventually we'll make it into a YouTube that we can show to all our friends who didn't show up tonight. It'll be one of those things you bring out at cocktail parties and make them watch before they get any dinner. So welcome to the Basic Income Guarantee webinar. We did this one in November of 22 with Leah Gazan and quick fill in my blank, Lorraine.
Hugh Siegel.
Hugh Siegel. And so this is the second in a series. We don't do them every year, but it's more talk about basic income. And the goal tonight is to educate all of the people who've signed up, plus us, the moderators. And I hope by the end of it, we all go away with a job to do, something that we need to do to help make basic income become a reality in Canada. Each speaker is going to have a chance to address you. Niigaan is going, and I'm going to use first names if that's all right. Do you want me to call you Dr. Sinclair? No. Anyway, each speaker is going to go and speak for about 15 minutes, talk to us about their knowledge of basic income and the things that they're thinking about it. Then we're going to have a question and answer. So if you've got questions, you can put them in the chat, and Lorraine and I will bring them up. And we are encouraging people to think about like basic things as well as things that would advance it as fast as possible. If there are any questions that we don't get to by the end of the hour, because we're hoping we're going to wrap up around 8 o'clock, then I would ask you to leave those questions in the chat and we will address them. Okay, so first of all, we're going to start with the land acknowledgement, and I'll ask Kathy Mason to unmute herself and do that for us.
Thank you. On behalf of GASP, which includes members across what is now known as Canada, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and ancestral territories of Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. We recognize and honor the enduring presence, resilience, and stewardship of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities who have cared for these lands and waters for generations. We acknowledge the deep histories, cultures, and contributions of these communities, past, present, and future. We express gratitude for the opportunity to live, work, and learn on these lands, and we commit ourselves to the ongoing process of truth, reconciliation, and respectful relationship building with Indigenous peoples.
Thank you, Kath. Now I'm going to ask Lorraine Green to explain what GASP is. And for some of you know it all too well. You've been working on it for years, but there will be others in the group that haven't quite figured that out.
Thanks, Karen. So GASP, which is Grandmothers Act to Save the Planet. We're a nonpartisan group of grandmothers and others. It's not just grandmothers that are part of our group. And we care deeply about the world that our descendants will inherit. And our vision is to create a green and just society, which is where basic income comes into play, for our grandchildren and children everywhere. GASP is involved in many environmental issues, locally, provincially, federally, and even internationally. And we're broken up into a number of different teams. We work on many campaigns, and we meet monthly, the group as a whole, and then each campaign and team leader has their own meetings when and if they are required. So if you need any more information, and we're always looking for new members, please get in touch with myself. Just send an email to info@gasp.org, and we'd love to have you join us. Thanks very much, and over to you, Karen.
Thank you. So now I'd like to introduce our two speakers. First of all, we've got Senator Kim Pate coming to us straight from Italy. and she has been in the Senate since 2016. Beyond her work with basic income, which has been a lot, she also works fervently on justice issues. And for many of us, we've gotten to know her over the last few years, and she is accessible and, as Niigaan said earlier, a fervent worker. So if you get an email from Kim Pate, watch out. She's asking you to do something. Our second speaker, or our first speaker, actually, I'm doing this in the reverse, is Niigaan Sinclair. Dr. Sinclair has a PhD from UBC. He is an Anishinaabe. He's a writer, an editor, an activist. I counted up, and I think he's been part of 7, 10 books. He's written a lot of books or helped write books. Currently, he's professor of Indigenous Studies at the University of Manitoba. So, oh, and he just got off of Power and Politics. So if any of you watch Power and Politics on CBC, you'll see him there, and you can wave at the screen. I'm sure they acknowledge a two-way wave, right? So first of all, I'm going to ask Niigaan to speak and explain, your take on basic income, where you think it's going, what we need to do, because these people who've come tonight, most of them are activists. Most of them are looking for something to do.
Looking for something to do. Okay. All right.
Well, yeah, they're looking for more actions, right? Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, no, they don't want jobs. Most of them are retired.
All right. Well, on that note, so bonjour everybody. Bonjour ndede we magada duk Niigaan we bidam de cost namago shindo dem. Nimen wenda mo mayayin. Bonjour Michel Masak na komasak mi janigije kaban dede. Bijou ni bijou. Namiji Nibakwe Nadonis. It's nice to be here. It's nice to share with you the language of the territory where I'm sitting right now, which is in Treaty 1. We are the first footstep of Canada. Here, we are the first treaty. We're the first province. We're the first to do lots of different things, and probably the most critical and important issue. We're not the first, but we are perhaps the most invested in the commitment of reconciliation across the entirety of society. And in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Northwestern Ontario, we are starting to look similarly to what it looks like in the North, which is a pivotal, progressive, important learning place that many of us don't think about as the center of Canada. But the center of Canada is not Toronto, nor Montreal, or Vancouver for that matter. It is the centers in which we are dealing with our most critical issue, which is how do we form relationships with Indigenous peoples, because that will help us deal with the two most pivotal crises that we are dealing with, which is how do we build a sustainable economy and how do we build an environment. Toronto will not answer that question, but Winnipeg will. And so we have these critical issue. And on a day like this, things are really hard to talk about because I just came from a very depressing panel where we're talking about people getting shot on university campuses down in the United States for sharing ideas. But, pivotally, it's that the kind of culture that's been created in school shootings across the entirety of North America, but particularly in the United States, has become very toxic, and it certainly didn't begin today. It's been going for quite a long period of time. And it's very unsafe to have controversial discussions. And so I want to just start by saying all of you are doing something very radical right now, which is called dialogue or conversation or talks. What I think is the most radical possible thing you can do, which is to treat people like human beings. And that is insane that we have to say that that is the most radical thing that you can do. But in a context of talking about basic income, the concept that human beings, regardless of where you're born or what culture or what language or what your sexuality is or where you live, the idea that everybody actually matters is an almost impossible idea in the context of the world that we live in at the moment. And frankly, the past 150 years. I mean, Canada was built on the idea that one group of people mattered and another group of people didn't, and built the entirety of an economy on that idea. And the outcome of that was a disastrous environment. I'm not just talking about a wildfire situation, which is the second highest in history this year, which is created out of climate change, which is from pollution, extractive industries, the destruction of land and water. I'm actually talking about the climate of how we treat each other. The ways that we see one another when we live in societies, and how we see issues of, for instance, representation, how we see issues of leadership, governance. But, I'll just boil it down to a simple principle, which is like, are we really kind with one another? Like, are we really, truly living up to that maple syrup flag that we sell ourselves that we are? Which frankly is at times propaganda. It's a nonsensical idea that we think that Canada is a place of justice when we live so unjustly in so many ways. And then we hold that up as the norm, and we put in provincial premiers particularly, but in some cases prime ministers, that celebrate selfishness, competitiveness, and individuality. And like, I don't actually think I'm saying anything radical, but all of what I've just said would probably get me on no-fly lists down in the United States, would get me banned and called as a radical or a woke, whatever it is this week. Because all I just simply said was, it doesn't really matter where you come from. You should matter.
Yeah.
You should be a person who should have freedom to say what you need to say. Even if I flagrantly disagree with it, that's fine. That's what the whole point of conversation is. I was just in a meeting today where a colleague of mine said that Indigenous knowledge isn't real knowledge. Even that I can handle. I can have a conversation around that, kind of ignorant and kind of denying basic things like facts. But, at least we can converse about those kinds of things. We can't always have conversations that are civil because we are in this environment in which it is very difficult, in which power inserts itself as a very dangerous entity that divides and treats one group of people as mattering in their opinions, and treats another group of people where they come from as a bunch of savage, superstitious, devil-worshipping, uncivilized peoples, which is basically the story of Canada. And I'm not even talking about 1867. I'm actually talking about 2025 here. I just read before I came on today the demonizing yet again of people who are experiencing homelessness in Barrie, Ontario. And that the mayor says that I've had enough of this lawlessness, and I'm just going to bulldoze their homes, and I'm going to force them onto even worse situations than they already are. Because a few people decided to arm themselves in dangerous situations. Well, how about we deal with the dangerous situation first of why somebody would need a crossbow, why somebody would need to have a weapon, instead of saying, oh, well, the fact you chose to have a weapon is your fault. Like, not the scenario that led you to decide you needed a weapon, or that you needed to resort to stealing bikes, or that you needed to resort to very difficult, it is amazing how many times I go to audiences and I say, there's only one thing I really know, and it is that nobody would choose diabetes as your life. Nobody would choose a life of stealing from others. Nobody ever would choose a life of living in a tent versus a warm, comfortable, safe home environment, place where you can raise your children, the place where you can be happy. You don't have to worry about having your stuff stolen. Is this am I saying something radical here? Not really. And that's how I feel about basic income. I feel that this is the most radical idea that we could possibly talk about. And I use a basic formula. Okay, so in our ceremonies, in our lodges as Anishinaabe people, there is one law that is paramount and central. And it is that in order to participate in the pipe ceremony, you must offer your tobacco, and that your tobacco goes in a bowl, and then in which, when we dress the pipe, everyone's tobacco together is selected and put in the pipe for everybody to smoke. Not all of us smoke, but when it is smoked, it's meant to be for all of us. Like, if you're going to participate, you have to bring a gift. In the same way that you receive a gift when we all participate. Like, when we all commit to each other, we're all better off. And this isn't even like a right thing to do. This isn't like some kind of altruistic thing to do. This isn't even like me making an argument of going, oh, like, let's all have a higher thought and think of the best for everybody. Like, I'm not even saying that stuff. I'm saying that this is a functional way that we live, because the winter is coming. And when the winter's coming, the only thing I know is that we are better off together, sharing, making sure each one of us is fed, and making sure that we don't steal off each other. Because if one group of people steals and takes all the food, or hoards all the food, everyone else is going to take from them. Because survival is the name of the game. It's what life's about. It's like you're trying your best to feed your family or feed yourself, or and the key of it understanding is that we have to make sure that we are only as strong as all of us are, the bonds that we have with each other, the relationality. To take that a step further, when we do our feasts, the rule that are by grandmothers particularly, but by elders, but really grandmothers, is everyone fed? The health of a community is, does the leadership make sure that everybody has a plate of food from the feast? And if that means that everybody gets a little less, if it's more important that everybody feeds, and if a leader says it's fine for 14 people to eat, but 25 people not to eat, that's the worst leader possible. That is not a leader that you want, and that is a leader that will create civil conflict and war, and ultimately atrophy in the community to fall apart. And so the grandmothers had the power in our communities to remove leaders who promoted selfishness, individuality, and competitiveness. Like, whoever got to the food first, eat first. Whoever could take the most amount of food and pile it on their plate and carry it away, got the most amount of food. Whoever made sure that they elbowed out and they kept out the people who are weaker, or the people that were more able-bodied, got the most amount of food. If there was a leader that said, oh, that's just the way it is. Oh, too bad. Oh, well. They didn't work. Oh, the person who is maybe not able to get up fast enough, or the person who, for some reason or another, wasn't able to find their dish in time, or this person over here who maybe showed up late. They all don't matter. It's too bad, so sad. The grandmothers would be like, "You're out. We're picking a leader that makes sure everybody is fed." That is the rule of Anishinaabe communities. And that's the rule of Anishinaabe leadership traditionally. I wouldn't say always we live that today, because capitalism, individuality, and competitiveness are very alluring. They're very, they're the great trick. They give you the idea of liberation, but they ultimately trick you, because liberation is only valuable insofar that if one is liberated, then no one is liberated. If only one is liberated, then no one is liberated. And so the key of it is understanding is basic income is this. Basic income is the idea that everybody actually matters, and that if we made sure that every single person had an opportunity, regardless of where they came from, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of their ability or their sexuality or their religion or what they say, and that we made sure that everybody committed to that central idea, we would cure child welfare like that. We would cure most crime like that. And we would have better paved roads, for those of you that care about those kinds of things, because people would be more inclined, more able, and then ultimately having more privilege and opportunity to be able to get trained, work, live in circumstances in which you can gain employment, because nobody wants to go to work when you're hungry. Nobody can go to work when you're traumatized. Nobody absolutely would believe in work if you think the job's a farce. If you think it's a big lie and a bunch of propaganda, then it's better off to live in a tent. And so my point of it is that we need to build a society that has integrity, that lives up to that maple syrupy sweetness that we sell ourselves on. And I'm going to offer the totally radical, crazy idea that if we believe truly that everybody mattered, we would build a society that would have worth. We wouldn't shoot people on college campuses. We wouldn't challenge or have the the worries of a U.S. president who threatens us, because the economy would be the strongest it would possibly be. You would not be able to threaten a strong economy when everybody buys in and everybody's a part and everyone is working effectively. So basic income is the idea that if everybody's fed, we build a country that lives up to the word kanata, the village. And the only thing I know about the village is villages are only survive if everyone sticks together, if everyone sees that everyone matters. And most importantly, you need to be with or stay with or stick with the people you disagree more than the people that you agree. That's easy stuff. Like, who cares about that? The people that you disagree with, that is the hardest commitment to make. And it's very stressful. It's hard, man. It's hard when you have another person in your community that's calling you horrendous names or saying horrendous things about your culture. The hardest thing is, this is a teaching my dad always had. My dad's belief was reconciliation really meant nothing if it was a bunch of people sitting in a room all agreeing. It was, can we disagree and stick together and stay at the table and not leave the room? That's the hardest thing about reconciliation. The reconciliation, wearing an orange shirt, that's the easy stuff. The hard stuff is, can we, when we take those orange shirts off, still stick together? Still focus on what it is that matters, even though we go to different religious institutions or we go to different political parties, or that we go to places that are vociferously different and say different languages, or, like, that's the real purpose. And for a long time, I had the naive belief, and I still do, but on a day like this, it's a little shaken, that educational institutions were supposed to be those places. But more and more, we see that educational institutions, when they say, diversity, equity, and inclusion, get targeted by powerful forces who see that as radical. And I don't know if that's radical, but I guess it's radical to say that everyone should matter. And so today, you're all a bunch of radicals by saying the simple, crazy idea that humans should matter, and that we should care for each other, and we should care for the earth, because the earth is always there for us. Are we always there for the earth? That's the big question.
So,
that I will hand it back over to you.
Can I ask you a question then? What would you ask this group to do besides hang around with people that disagree with them?
Well, I always say the first thing that you always want to make sure, or the first thing that you can do, is talk to the person who would never, ever, ever listen to me, not because of something I've said, but something they think I represent. There are many people who think, oh, he's Indigenous, who cares? Or, oh, he's a woke academic, so who cares? Or he says crazy things like humans should matter, who cares? And so, unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, those are a lot of people in many of your age groups. Because for a long time, the principle of the Canadian education system was that one group of people mattered and another group of people didn't. And you were tested on that. You were rewarded when you said one group of people mattered, the other one didn't. And most importantly, then you worked in industries that reified that idea over and over and over again, the biggest industry being who you voted for, or that the political parties that represented you celebrated that idea. And they did really until 2015. And the one touch point moment is we finally got a federal government that was like, oh, maybe we should talk about Indigenous rights for the first time in history. Maybe we should talk about not treating Indigenous peoples like they're refuse in landfills. Maybe we should talk about having Indigenous peoples as a part of, or Indigenous peoples taking care of their children out of the child welfare system. So 2015 is I think a big linchpin moment for the country. It's also a point in which we became economically viable, because we realized that this huge group of people that have been under-resourced, left out of the economy, and chronically undereducated maybe we should do something about that, and we would actually build the force of the economy and force of the inclusion into industry. And if you want me to show you evidence of what that outcome is, today, or actually not today, Monday, but today was when the story came out, but Monday was when it was released. At the University of Manitoba campus, where I sit right now, we have the largest on-campus community of First Nations, Inuit, Métis students ever in history at a Canadian university. And that's in nursing, law, arts, science, kinesiology, agriculture, medicine. Medicine is the one I missed there. We have more Indigenous doctors than ever in history, nurses than ever in history, teachers than ever in history. We have more Indigenous students taking Indigenous studies than ever in history. And beside them, sitting beside them in that classroom, is the most competent generation of Canadians in history. They've learned more about Indigenous peoples, the history of Indigenous contributions, and then things that Canada has done to impact those contributions more than any other group in history. And so the number came out on Monday that we are at 3,248 First Nations, Inuit, Métis students here on campus. We have 31,578 students. That's a number of 11% in Manitoba. The population of First Nations, Inuit, Métis people in Manitoba is 18%. Here's what I mean by that is in 2019, that number was below 2,000. So exponentially, Indigenous students are catching up because of competent teachers, competent institutions, and the number of people like not just my father, but also the critical mass of Indigenous educators like myself, but also the people that we work with, my non-Indigenous Canadian colleagues who are believing, understanding, and becoming competent for the first time in history, the most competent people under the age of 35, because they've studied it from the very beginning, and we can't stop now. Because what's happening here in Manitoba is happening everywhere else, but maybe, well, in the north, for example, 50%, but in places like Ontario, you're catching up to us. Like I said, the center of creation might not be Toronto, everybody.
Well, it's a shocking, shocking piece of fact you've told us, Niigaan, that I don't live in Toronto, but some people do. So thank you so much. Now I'm going to turn over to Kim and ask her to talk to us about basic income, and then we're going to go into the Q&A after you've done, Kim. So take it away.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And I think you see why the leadership of people like Niigaan and so many others is vitally important in not just these issues and not just the issues of environmentalism, but having had the privilege and responsibility of walking with and working with, a number of members of your family, Niigaan, and walking with you in Winnipeg in winter as you go with the Bear Plan, knowing and reading your incredible academic and professional work, listening to you, providing the kind of important political commentary that we hear is so vitally important. And I'm really, it's an honor to be here with you. And it's also an honor to be with GASP. I mean, you grandmothers are amazing, and all thinking of generations to come is something that I think too little of our policy and too little of our legislation and too little of how our leadership looks at the issues going forward, as Niigaan has so, astutely, ultimately, compassionately, and lovingly talked about what we need to do. And I just want to pick up a bit on where Niigaan left off. As some of you know, I usually, yes, I'm over in the seat of the colonial invasion of Turtle Island, and I'm in Italy right now and heading later this morning. It's actually 1 in the morning or sometime other in here, and I'm heading to Geneva, where of course the UN is partly situated at a time when we see throughout the world so much unrest and so so many challenges to all of the principles that you stand for and that Niigaan has just so articulately and in such a caring way talked about, because we need to be looking at different leadership. As many of you know, I became interested in this issue in large part because of the very issues that Niigaan has just talked about, which is I was working predominantly first with young people, then with men, and then for 25 years before I was appointed with women. It's how I came to know his dad. It's how I came to know lots of folks in the system, because the place where First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people are vastly overrepresented is within our prisons and within our criminal legal system. I don't call it a justice system because there really isn't much just about it, and certainly not for most of the people who become ensnared in it. And so, as we're having this conversation, in the year that the Canadian government agreed by the end of this year, one of the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action was to end the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in our prison system, in our criminal legal system. And that would mean that by December 31st this year, we should be releasing close to 400 women and several thousand men from our penitentiaries, because women are 1 in 2 of those serving federal prison sentences. Men are 1 in 3. And when you go to Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the North, the 3 territories, Indigenous people represent between 75 to 100%. And when you go to young people, and young women in particular, and girls, it's even worse, 95 to 100% of those in custody. Why do I start there when we're talking about basic income? Because one of the things that became very clear to me as I started doing this work out of law school is we're taught, at least when I was going to law school, we were taught that the law applied equally to everybody. It became very clear to me that just like power, just like resources, the law actually disproportionately benefits those who already have the most. And so we see there's a reason our prisons are full of people who are poor, people who are racialized, people who have disabling mental health issues, people who are challenged, and people basically who are failed by every other system. So very, it it took me a bit of time to figure this out. I'm not always the fastest learner, but hopefully uh, we keep moving forward. And one of the things about 25 years ago, it became clear to me that the only way that we would actually achieve some of the decolonizing, decriminalizing, and decarcerating that I was working on was as if we actually build up community and ensure that people have the supports they need. And so basic income or guaranteed livable income became part of that. It's not the only strand of a support system that's needed, but it's a very important one, and one that it's very clear most people in the community. I mean, we currently spend, when I say we collectively, and I'm now part of the government, so I own part of a big part of the responsibility for this, $92 billion a year. Dr. Zhao, who's been doing, many of us know, who's doing research at UBC, has updated those numbers. We used to say $80 billion, but she's actually pulling together the research showing that we're spending $92 billion per year on efforts that keep people stuck in poverty rather than providing ways for them to rebound out, whether it's because they're in a circumstance, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's escaping climate issues or like fires and other you know disasters that are human made in on the planet, whether it's because they're temporarily out of work because they're involved in gig work or seasonal employment, or AI is taking over their jobs, whether it's because they have a health issue or a mental health issue or a disability, whether it's because they want to care for others, whether it's their children, their parents, somebody else who needs care. And we don't allow for those opportunities. We make most of the income supports we provide are judgmental, there based on the myths and stereotypes that poor people or people who don't have economic resources are somehow immoral or incapable of making good decisions about how to spend their money. Even though, again, all of the work that's been done, whether it's the Manitoba Income Project, whether it's the Ontario-based income, whether it's looking at the work, the cash transfer work that Dr. Zhao has done, whether it's the Cree Hunter program in Quebec, or the work that PEI, cross-party, conservatives, Greens, everybody coming together to say, we really want to address these issues. And so, it's not a new thing. When I came to the Senate, it was one of the main reasons, and that I wanted to be in the Senate. Many of you know it was a group of Indigenous women who I have a ton of respect for, who urged that I basically walk my talk. If I got into that kind of position, then I should actually do this kind of work on these sorts of issues. And so and then when the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry came out with one of their calls for justice was a guaranteed livable income, it really pushed all of us to think more seriously about how we address these issues in a way that takes care of everybody, not just those who are the most privileged. It's not a new idea in the Senate. In 1971, the Senate Committee to Fight Against Poverty, chaired by Senator Kroll, pushed for a basic income. So that's more than 50 years ago. We all know and love, and you mentioned at the beginning, Hugh Siegel, who's been the late Hugh Siegel, who's been part of this. We know the late Murray Sinclair. We know many, many people for many generations have been pushing for this. And we also know that it's something that the time has come. We actually need to be addressing um, how we do this. I'm not the first politician to be looking at some of this. In addition to Senator Kroll and Hugh Siegel and Art Eggleton, who have all worked on these issues. We've also had incredible leadership like Leah Gazan, and who has done incredible work in this area. We've had um, Julie Dershowitz, who introduced a bill, and together Leah and I introduced the same bill in the last session of Parliament, and this session of Parliament I've reintroduced Bill S206, which would talk about a universally accessible, as in the minute someone falls below a certain level of income or finances, they would be eligible. It would be livable, not just something that keeps people stuck in poverty the way the current systems do. There is not one income support initiative in this country that actually lifts people out of poverty. They keep people in poverty. And so if you're on social assistance in a province or territory, oftentimes the conditions are such that you can't work more than a certain number of hours or make a certain amount of money, or every dollar is clawed back dollar for dollar. Sometimes if you work or you make some of that money, then you're no longer eligible for pharmacare or dental care or vision care. That is vital for folks. So we need to, that's why I say it needs to be part of a strand of a social support system, not the only mechanism. It's not income alone. But, oftentimes I hear people say, well, giving money to poor people, they'll just waste it. Again, we know Dr. Zhao's research, and really I commend that to all of you, is showing just the opposite, that when you actually give, and certainly when I talked to the former premier of PEI, during the pandemic, he talked about how the money that was being provided by the federal government meant that the province of PEI went from a deficit to actually a surplus during that period. Because why? Because people, when they had money, they spent it in their
Yeah.
community. It actually really invigorated their communities. They spent it on local products, whether it was food, shelter, clothing, training that they needed. And we know that from Dr. Zhao's research that when she provided the cash transfers, or when the group that she was part of provided the cash transfers, homeless people in Vancouver, within a month, most of them were housed. Within 3 months, many of them were working, and many of them went on and the financial piece was that the savings was almost somewhere around $8,000. And so when you see that we could actually invest in people and actually spend less on poverty, to me, it becomes a no-brainer, and it's part of the reason that so many, speaking to Niigaan's point, people who initially sound like they will disagree, don't. And it's been a number of the folks in the Senate who are involved in business and in tax reform who have also been great supporters of this. As many of you know, during the pandemic, it it was we had 50 senators write to the prime minister urging him at the time to um, ensure that we didn't just stop with something like CERB during the pandemic, but that we actually continued on and built on that, and urged the government to develop a guaranteed livable income. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Many of the folks who intervened started talking about it being an unnecessary cost, or too high a cost. The parliamentary budget officer has shown us otherwise, that it could be achieved. And virtually nobody talks about the benefits that again Niigaan spoke about, which is if people are fed, housed, clothed, educated, well, guess what? We see lower crime rates. We see part of the reason Dr. Evelyn Forget, amazing research she's done on the Mincome Project, um, got involved in this was, of course, because of the high cost of emergency room visits for people who were poor, who didn't have a family doctor, or who didn't have the means to deal with the precursors, the preventable life situations that can lead to diabetes, heart disease. And so it can reduce healthcare costs. And certainly the area that, of course, that I've worked mostly in, it can reduce victimization and criminalization and incarceration. And in Scandinavian countries, where they've looked at these sorts of approaches, where they've talked about greater income equality being important, as well as and linked it to housing and education and supports, general community and supports, have seen not only has it been a better standard of living for everybody, there's been more equality, more caring and concern for other people. And not surprising, if you're living in a building where someone who is a lawyer and someone who is a single mom is living, and your kids all go to the same school, guess what? You have a better education system for all those kids, because people are invested in ensuring that not just their children have a good education if they're all going to the
Yes.
same school. So really, we're talking about what I think of as, well, Niigaan said it better than I could, and we're talking about how do we create a world, a country, a community, a village where everybody is taken care of, and that it isn't just a free for all, capitalist grab for all there is, and no concern for the people who have the least. And um, I love the notion that if we first are taking for ourselves, then we should not be in leadership positions. And that is fundamentally not how we have tended to organize ourselves. And so part of this is a broader thinking as well. But basic income for me fits into that idea that we need to explore the ways that we can move forward. And I know you said, what do you want? What can people do, and what can people well, I think letting every one of you, letting your member of parliament and others in your region, the senators who represent your provinces, letting them know you want to see this kind of approach, and not just this bill. I'm not suggesting it's just but that we need to be looking at some of the other issues that, at a time when, there's a push by the Mr. Polyev to talk about stand your ground legislation for people in, protecting their homes, and there's not the same protection for children and those who are vulnerable in our society, and whether it's women fleeing violence, whether it's all the there's a reason the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls inquiry saw that the very same issues that give rise to Indigenous women being more likely to be disappeared, murdered, on the street, homeless, are the same issues that result in them being disproportionately criminalized. We should take a lesson from all of that and talk about how we remedy it. And basic income is one of the pieces. And so, really urging this kind of thinking to all of not all parliamentarians, but also your neighbors, and the person who says something racist or sexist or ableist or xenophobic, really taking those people on. And I know that many of you have seen the fact series we pulled together, Spend Less on Poverty, Invest More in People. And one of the things we tried to do with that is really address some of the counter arguments that people come up with around the costs of a basic income, um, the impact on people's ability to actually plan. As Niigaan said, nobody chooses to be homeless. And when people say things like that, they may take a point in time where someone has no other options but to be in dire straits, and characterizing no choice as a choice is really the way that we continue the myths and stereotypes and blame the very people who are most oppressed for their own marginalization. We also have a number of fact sheets around people in seasonal work and what happens to in terms of the economy, all of those things. So anybody who's interested, I would certainly encourage you to look at that. And then stay tuned for the research that Dr. Zhao has done, which should be coming out, I think, in November or so. She'll be publishing, which is the updated, the $92 billion a year it's costing to keep people in poverty. And she's looking at how much it costs to administer the hundreds. I didn't even know until she started doing the research, the hundreds of income support initiatives that we could be looking at streamlining. If we want to cut administration, we could actually look at how do we streamline the administration so that resources, people and money are more available to actually assist the folks who are challenged. So that's a bit of the background, and I hope a few of the ideas of action people could take. And um, if you want copies of the fact sheets, I think you have copies of them. GASP has them, but if they're also on our website, if people want to get them there, and you can also email, and we can send them to you. And those of you who are on the beginning will hear, if you get an email from me, it may be requiring you or asking you to do something else. That's true, but and then also some people, this is not the work of one person ever in a job like I'm doing. And so a number of people have commented on the speech I did at second reading for Bill S206. If you want a footnoted version of that, just email us, because we do make sure that all the facts, so that people can go to the resources and go to the source of some of this data. We can provide that. And I want to thank all of you who have assisted in ensuring that we have some of the best data and some of the best thinking about this, because this is never the work of one person. And Bill S206 is the work and the labor and the love and the inspiration of many of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kim. That was great. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. And I'd like to start, maybe we'll direct this to Niigaan. The first one is from Sid. How would you respond to Indigenous leaders who think that basic income is just another form of welfare that reinforces failure?
Well, I mean, the the belief that Indigenous peoples enjoy welfare is not a specific to any racialized group. So I think the delusion that Indigenous peoples are in positions in which they where welfare is a luxury is like that just doesn't that's not true. And I think anyone who thinks that, although certainly I could understand why, there are Indigenous peoples who have different political views all across the spectrum. Um, the underlying sentiment, though, I think is something that needs to be addressed. The fact is incorrect, but I think that the misunderstanding of what basic income is just a factual issue. Many Indigenous peoples just don't understand, that why would you want a policy that is perhaps already being addressed on First Nations, and they would equate welfare to basic income. And I think that that's a basic misunderstanding of what basic income is that it's not welfare and it's not meant for, it's not even unemployment insurance. What it is it's an opportunity for people to know that they don't have to be in a situation of crisis, and there's other options in which they can build, and a good basic income system would have abilities for individuals to have access to a good social welfare system in which education is possible. Unfortunately, none of those things are possible on First Nations. So the underlying issue, I think, of what an Indigenous leader might say would be that in certain Indigenous communities, there's no opportunity. So why would we want to facilitate what they might see as incentive to not seek out more opportunity? The crux of that argument, the center of that argument, is the problem is opportunity, and that they haven't had opportunity in order to be able to access basic things in which they can, thrive or have opportunity to become the career or the vision in which they seek. At the same time, I'm of a position, and I would, I'm pretty confident Leah would agree with me on this, is that if implemented correctly and fully or robustly, basic income could be something that would bring back traditional values within communities, because it's my position that basic income is an Indigenous tradition. Like it's an Indigenous principle, the idea that everybody has access to the same to food, the same amount of medicines, the same amount of medicine carriers or knowledge keepers, the same amount of ceremonies it's not that power doesn't exist in Indigenous communities, but there's checks and balances within those power structures that ensures that when somebody starts to hoard, that there is an equal and opposite reaction by the community to make sure that that hoarding is not socially acceptable. And that is something in which those items are dispersed, or they are certainly in a position in which the community will deal with it accordingly to make sure that there is an egalitarian structure in place that is seen as the status quo. So that being said, I think that there's a basic misunderstanding from Indigenous leaders about what basic income is. And so I'd want to address on whoever might say that. But I also think that the underlying issue, as always, is opportunity and poverty.
Yeah.
And we have to deal with those issues, and probably the most pressing issue, which is around poverty and hopelessness. Hopelessness is the real epidemic in our communities that leads to a whole host of challenges, whole host of issues. One of them is absent men, absent fathers, absent uncles, which is a whole epidemic in Indigenous communities. And then an equal and related epidemic is murdered, missing Indigenous women and girls.
Right.
All of those things stem from issues of poverty, and also, the things that come out of poverty, such as stereotypes, which then are held by justice systems, so that when someone goes missing or someone is seen as a perpetrator, they're either dealt with too harshly or they're not dealt with at all.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Now I have a question for Kim. This is from Myron. You quoted a statistic of $92 billion to keep people stuck in poverty. How is that calculated?
Well, it's actually Dr. Zhao's research that she's currently doing. And so I would say basically what she's looked at is what we're spending right now on various income support initiatives, what we're spending to police those in terms of the work that's going into every provincial and some municipal and some particular income support programs, as well as housing initiatives that are not providing subsidized housing. And so I would, sounds like a terrible cop out, but it is Dr. Zhao's research. So I would say stay tuned for that coming out, because she is provides incredible detail on these, and those are the figures that she's coming up with. So based on what we're actually spending right now, with limited results.
So we're spending $92 billion and we're not really solving the problem.
No, I mean, we're policing people's morality, their income. We're making it harder for them to get ahead. And to Niigaan's point, I mean, I'll never forget about 8 years ago when we were up north, and we were there for other meetings with a number of senators. And one of the women leaders in the community, an elder, had knew that I was interested in basic income. And so she asked me a question about it, and she said, could we do that instead of what's happening now? And she was part of a group who wanted to develop a language program and a cultural program, and potentially, in the future, she was incredibly um, focused on, and eventually in ecotourism, as a way for the community to generate its own economic independence. And she said, but the problem right now is we want some of our, and she was talking specifically about some of the young men in the community. And she said, but they have to stay playing video games in their homes, waiting for non-existent jobs that are likely never to come. But if they come out on the land, if they're hunting, if they're learning their culture, if they're learning their language, then the presumption is they're not available to work, which is one of the stipulations, which is ridiculous in a number of contexts, and not just in that context, but in a number of contexts where jobs just aren't available, and the presumption that if people do other things, that they're making themselves not available. And so I do think we have to, we need to keep rethinking how we make those kinds of moralistic judgments, and what it does in result. We end up policing people. I mean, whoever the social worker is, or whoever goes into that community, no doubt flies in. Next week, I'm going with Nishnabé Aski to talk about some of these very issues and how much money is wasted in just Northern Ontario
Yeah.
by people fly in, in this case, legal systems that do nothing to actually create greater community safety or equality. And this is another group who has come saying, we want some of these income supports, but we also want to talk about how do we actually reclaim um, the the authority to govern ourselves in this way. So so I think there are many examples that Niigaan would know even more, far more than I would, but many examples where people are very clear that something that provides more autonomy and more ability for people to actually um, contribute to their community, contribute to their culture, is going to be far more beneficial.
Okay.
Great. We have another question from Lucette. I'll maybe direct this to you, Kim, and then Niigaan, maybe you can add whatever Kim misses, which I'm sure won't be too much. So realistically, how soon do you think guaranteed basic income will become a reality?
Oh.
Wave a magic
Okay.
wand.
Okay, I'm gonna punt that right over to Niigaan. No, I think, I mean, it's interesting that something else Niigaan said that I think is so true. Young people get this. Like when I'm talking to young people, they get it. It's like, this is a way that we can take care of each other, and it tends to be people of my generation and older, and quite frankly, the politicians who are the problem. And, many people say, well, it's not the right time, right now we got to deal with Trump. Well, hello, if you've got people who can't, don't have a place to live, don't have a way to feed themselves, can't support themselves or their family, um, guess who's going to the extremism? Guess who's losing faith, for good reason,
Yeah.
in our government and democracy and our institutions? And so, we have set this up, and I say we, I mean, um, the, most government, most officials say that, virtually, actually every party, there are supporters for this. Every party, the conservatives, even the ones that are even, if, dare I say it, more right of that, support it, sometimes for all kinds of different reasons. But they support this idea, and yet the most progressives often say one of the challenges is we probably won't see the greatest benefits in an electoral cycle. And so poor people, racialized folks, people with disabilities, as we've seen with the disability benefit, I mean, Canada has all kinds of basic incomes already. We have a Canada Child Benefit was designed to lift people with children out of poverty, with the Guaranteed Income Supplement designed to lift elders out. When the BC panel did their work on basic income, they suggested even more incremental ways. PEI has been looking at this. I mean, we have so many examples of us sort of hiccuping towards it. But it's like we keep saying, but we'll do it for this group, but not for that group. And and I think it's time that we just say it's time. And this is why not now? And do much the way, Medicare started in this country. Saskatchewan said they were going to do it, and then every province and territory wanted in on the game. And I think it's going to be much the same. It takes someone taking a step. I tried to encourage the Premier of PEI, the former Premier of PEI, to be the one, as well as the Premier of Newfoundland. And and recently, when I saw him at the the speech from the throne, was trying to encourage your Premier, Niigaan. And so, encouraging someone to take the step, because I think it is, it sounds a bit too simplistic, but I think it is that basic, that we need someone to, to really wade in there.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Kim? Do we need another study of whether basic income works or not?
Well, I personally don't think we need another study. I think we need to start it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Okay. As like
it's
we could sort of say to everybody here, there's been 50 years of studies. There've been
Yeah.
all sorts of programs that have worked. So yeah, no, I just don't. When people tell me they want to have another study, I kind of start to shake. I want them to roll it out like they did daycare. Just let's do it. Anyway, that's me, and I'm not in the government. So, yeah. So there's another question here from Sheila that I don't quite understand, Sheila. There is a new report today from Prosper called Money as Medicine that specifically focused on Indigenous people and cultural values. Would that be backed up by the Ontario pilot participants?
Oh, I think I have an idea what Sheila, because I just saw that, and thank you, Sheila, for sending it on. Yeah, it was a number of, it reminded me of when the doctors said money is medicine. And some of you will know that doctors started writing prescriptions for people to have glasses, or people to have food, or people to
Oh,
be
right.
put on the list for housing. And so this is a group, I don't know the group, Prosper, I think it's called, and they talk about they've done a partnership with some and I don't know, Niigaan, if you know about this, but some First Nations communities, and are talking about and they talk about money or income as part of the medicine of healing and assisting First Nations on moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Like, here's the thing, is that there's like we just have to keep at it, right? Like here's the thing is entrenched attitudes and beliefs happen everywhere. And what the biggest and most entrenched attitude is that capitalism will save us. And that I think the only way that you encounter that idea is you have to give people a positive and very consistent message that while capitalism, I'm not here to be Mr. Anti-conservative or something or other, but I am here to tell you that capitalism is an end game that is dangerous and violent, and there's no liberation
Yeah.
in individuality, because none of us are an island. And that's the thing, is that I think it's the most dysfunctional way to live, which is to believe that somehow um, this facade and this lie that everybody earned your own hoarding ability, or like that your wealth is somehow magically because you earned it in some way. Like it's because of opportunity, it's because of race, it's because of gender,
Yeah.
and that doesn't mean anyone's bad people. It just means that we have to be cognizant and aware that there is a much bigger roles to play, or much bigger solutions. And the number one solution is like, let's talk about something as much as important, which is that everyone should matter. And that should lead conversations of a kind of ethical, perhaps capitalism, whether those two words can ever belong together. That isn't philanthropy, because philanthropy is colonial and terribly racist.
Mhm.
Philanthropy doesn't solve anything, but partnership will. Treaty does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying that, Niigaan, because, one of the things that we know is part of the reason there are so many charities in the US is because of how unequal society has. So people focus on philanthropy and charity. And again, it's because it's those who feel that they are superior to others, who then give to, is often that charitable notion is, we don't often unpack it. So thank you for doing that.
And our Income Tax Act is designed by those people to give them credits. Have we got time for another question? It's almost 10 after 8.
Yeah.
Anybody want to stay? Well, one more question, and then
We'll get back to you with the other questions
the
that
other
are still in the
questions. Yeah.
chat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a question here from Frank, and maybe Niigaan, you can answer this one. There are some that recommend that we should improve existing programs so that they are effective, as this is more doable than trying to design a new overarching program of basic income. Which of these two approaches is more feasible?
Well, I mean, the adage is that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Well, I mean, like there are certain ways that are just not going to work. Like, for instance, okay, I'll give you an example. So, when I think I probably shared this with other people who have heard me speak before, but there's nothing more elitist, divisive, and frankly, the context of Winnipeg, racist than expecting people who are the most disenfranchised, the most over-policed, the most mistreated, chronically undereducated, put in situations of danger, than to say, oh, by the way, now you got to stand in a line for a sandwich because we bad this week. Like, what a bunch of bullshit that is. like anyone who thinks that missions are doing good work because and I say missions very intently because that's the problem, is that and then expecting people to somehow feel liberated by that is nonsensical and the stupidest thing I ever heard in my life. So I used to work in a certain organization in which people had to sit through a sermon before they got fed. Like, that's right up there with residential schools. Like, people who are starving, and now you have to get them to, like, what a garbage message. Oh no, by the way, that's the most anti-Jesus Christ thing I could possibly imagine. Like, Christ himself would be like, that's a terrible idea. And I don't even mean to be blasphemous, but
No.
I mean, I don't think I'm wrong on that. And anyone who reads the Bible for 5 minutes realizes that Jesus was a guy who definitely would believe in basic income.
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe that should be our new motto.
Yeah. Jesus believes. Why don't you?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, so I think that the churches, as an example, and this is where I think, and please forgive me, just know that I mean love and kindness, but the churches have so failed in this regard to promote basic ideas like everyone matters. Now, I've been to many churches that are very revolutionary and radical in that they say, hey, maybe we should act like how Jesus says. And the fact that that's radical and revolutionary is blows my mind because I'm pretty sure Jesus frequently addressed capitalists and said, you aren't living the way in which kindness is at the center of your work. Like, isn't that the whole thing? Like, isn't that the whole thing about, like, I lectured in a church the other day, and it seems to me that, like, Jesus was pretty much anti people hoarding. Anyways, I just, the fact, like, I come to, not just sessions like this, but I live throughout my life, and I just am incredulous that I know more about the Bible than people who go to the church for their entire lives. And like all I do is I do some passing reads of stuff for my own literary interest and my degrees and so on. And like I don't live this stuff like, but like I somehow know more about what Jesus says than Christians. And my point, my very sort of incredulous motion is that I think that anything's possible, and if we can put someone on the moon, then we can do this. This is simple stuff. We have to commit to principles of ethics and integrity. And in terms of Canada, Canada's going to follow its own laws, which is that it says that apparently everybody matters. Apparently everyone has supposed to have access to healthcare. Apparently everyone's supposed to have access. It's a human right to be in a safe community. Like, I don't know, like, seems to me being fed would be an important part of that safe community, and life, liberty, and happiness, to use a US phrase. It would mean that not everybody has to worry about over their shoulder if everyone has is out to get them.
Mm-hmm.
And that would mean that we have to address poverty.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
Sure.
why is that a debate? But anyways, so anyways, my point of it is like I think that anything's possible, but I would say that do I think systems can be better? Absolutely. I think the number one thing is we need to stop organizations that think that they're doing work that is liberating people when they make them stand in line for a sandwich. And that is horribly racist and horribly divisive and violent and inappropriate. Everybody in that organization that thinks they're doing a good thing needs to be shown how that is right up there with residential schools. And that doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that we have to be kind and generous to people who perhaps don't know. And we can't shame them. We can't put their names on social media. We have to say, hey, like maybe there's some problems with that model, and we can go and bring a sandwich to people. And oh, by the way, Indigenous peoples have been doing that for tens of thousands of years. It's called feeding our elders or feeding our children or feeding those who can't feed themselves. And that's like a principle. That's what the grandmothers look for in leadership. And oh, by the way, the side effect of that is people don't rob each other now.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
people don't hurt each other now, or people now are healthy and we can use that money for healthcare so that we can all have appropriate surgeries when we hurt our knee and don't have to wait for a year and a half. And oh, if we even have money, we might even fix potholes. Hey, there's your conservative leaning conversation now. We make sure everyone's fed and we get our potholes fixed.
Well, that is great. I want to thank you, Kim and Niigaan. This has been the best hour and 15 minutes we've had in a long time. And we're going to be sending out information to everybody who signed up for this webinar. And we certainly, I know I'm looking at the comments in the chat. People are excited, they're thoughtful, they're thinking about it, which is what we want them to do. And we want them, I think I heard we want them to call their MP. We want them to call their senator and talk to them and say, why aren't we doing this? How can you sleep at night if you know that you cannot feed your children, you cannot pay your rent, and you're not going to have any money left over after the third week of the month. You're going to have the last week of the month with nothing. And that's what we're trying to fix, right? We're trying to get everybody to share. So thank you very much. If you have any more questions, put them into the chat right now. We're going to keep track of them. And again, Niigaan and Kim, and poor Kim, up in the middle of the night. Now you can get tucked back into bed and have a little snooze. So, and thank you again, both of you, very, very much. And you never know, we might call you next year. I'm hoping like next year we can have a celebration and we will have started basic income. We won't be just talking about it and talking about, well, will it ever happen? I think time is right. And one thing you said, Kim, earlier about people always say, well, it's not the right time. We have to worry about Trump. There is no good time. And when we're flush with money, it's not good. When we're poor, it's not good. Let's just do it.
Mhm.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Thank
And
you.
go away and plan who you're going to call. Make those calls, write those letters, and we'll talk to you all again, hopefully very soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good
Take
night.
care.
I'll call it a day. I'll end it.
Just hang on a minute.
Okay.
Hang on. We're just going to, yes, yeah, we can all just say, we're going to have a little Zoom in a few days, and after we've had the meeting with Karina, and we'll rehash how tonight went and everything. So
I think you did beautifully, you guys. You just were
Yeah.
super. Bravo,
Yes.
bravo.
Bravo.
good.
Bravo.
Well,
Okay.
it was exciting. It was
Yeah,
exciting.
it was fun.
Excellent.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
So
very,
good. So
very
good.
good, very good. And
Yippee.
Lorraine and I were both nervous today, so we're happy it's over. I'm going to have a drink.
Have a drink now. Okay.
I thought it was really, I just want to put my 2 cents in. I thought it was great. I love the way you
Yes.
do it, Karen. You seem so chill. And
Okay,
it brings people together,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah, it does.
lovely.
Yeah.
well, you
Lovely.
know, my problem is I don't see why people, like when people say this shouldn't happen, it drives me crazy. Like, and you know, we really should be doing it yesterday. And we're, you know, people in PEI are talking about another study that's going to go on for 7 years.
Well,
It makes me want to roll over and play dead. Like I just,
I mean, it's exactly the same with climate change. You know, they
Yeah.
keep putting it off and putting it off because it's not the right time. Well, it's never
Yeah.
going to be the right time. You just got to bite the bullet and do it, you know?
yeah, yeah.
And I
yeah.
really like that you gave an action. I just think a call to action. That was
Mhm.
fabulous. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, we all have to do something. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, and well, that was great. I'm going for a drink. Good night,
Okay.
everybody.
Good night,
And-
everybody.
You
I
deserve
wish
it.
I was there
Bye.
with you. Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks, Louise.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Bye, everybody.